multidisciplinario que intenta ser un espacio de encuentro para las muy diversas disciplinas que se cultivan. I want to welcome our foreign invitees, our foreign visitors, and thank you for coming here. Hicieron todas las pruebas y salieron muy bien. Como el chiste aquel de un señor que se anunciaba como el hombre más fuerte del mundo y que ponían grandes bloques de cemento. Él pasaba al escenario y podía levantar los bloques uno por uno, el segundo, el tercero. Es una modificación de una versión más mexicana, menos contable aquí. ¿No me oyen? Estoy contando una cosa muy importante de lo que está sucediendo ahora, que se hizo todo lo posible para tenerlo todo bien en el entrenamiento, salió bien. Entonces este señor, había un señor muy... Todo salió bien. No eran cubos, era otra cosa, pero no importa, era un chiste mexicano. Eh,
Statistical mechanics for biology. There are 3 steps. should be able to predict, I've already said it, the distribution, which may be a power law. Next slide. So we're nearing the end now. We should be on 23 law. A slope of 0.63. The data is 0.88. 0. cell types, but keep all of our old cell types. And I think Max found that in such networks, and he's right there, we can ask him, that the networks evolved to a power law distribution of inputs per binary variable. And I think that's probably true for real genetic regulatory networks. So maybe we can ask Max. Anyway, I think those are the answers. So I think that's the answer to your question. Right now, we've only got one way that critical networks evolve in the space of all networks, and it's evolving to keep your old cell types and add a new cell type. Hey, Max, did you find a power law distribution of inputs when you did that?
No, actually, those were very small networks as to find the distribution of inputs. It was clearly that these networks had global regulators, that the statistics was...
Okay.
Well, Stu, we really appreciate the effort of you being with us this morning. We have to go to the next talk. We're a little bit over time. But we really want to thank you for this wonderful talk and for the effort to be with us.
I'm sorry I can't be there, Max. Have fun. Thank you, everybody. Bye, Max.
Bye, Stu.
Wait a minute. Laura?
Yes, I'm here, Professor.
Yeah, you have to get me up.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for bearing with us, for being here. We wanted Professor Kaufman to be here with us. He also wanted to be here with us. Unfortunately, last-minute cancellation, but he was really willing to talk to this audience, even remotely. So we did the best that we could to have him with us this morning. And now we have a speaker in the flesh. I think that this was the only case through a video conference. All the other speakers in this event are going to be here. And the next speaker is Professor Corsi, Maria Corsi Cabrera. She is getting ready with the microphone. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to talk about sleep, the sleeping brain. So, but I think it's on the other side, the control. Okay. Ay, mi madre, ¿cuál será? Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Which one? With this one? Okay. No, I have. Can you hear? Okay.
Loud and clear.
Yes? Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity. It is not too loud?
No, it's okay.
It's okay? Okay. To talk about sleep. Because we human adults spend... Let me see which is the pointer. No? There's nothing. Well, because we human adults, that change with age and with species, we spend more or less 30% of our life sleeping. So you can see here, this is 24 hours, and this is wakefulness in yellow, and then you have 30% of our time sleeping, so you can calculate how many years have you been sleeping. Right now, I have about 20 years sleeping. So we ask many questions. I will talk first about synchronization of brain oscillations to understand the general idea. And then I will talk, I don't know, why it doesn't, well, we ask several questions, the following. Does synchronization degrades along irregular waking hours, a regular day? Does sleep restores synchronization? Does prolonged sleep deprivation alter synchronization? What happens to synchronization during sleep? During REM sleep, we will see later, and does REM sleep deprivation has consequences? And then the brain of REM sleep. Perhaps the bottom of the figures, you can see the bottom maybe at the side screens because it's very low here. Okay. First of all, I have to tell you, perhaps many of you already know, that sleep is not a state, quiet state. It's a process. It changes all the time. The brain changes all the time along the hours that we are sleeping. You can see here a complete sleep cycle here. The first thing to know is that there are two kinds of sleep: non-REM sleep, which is here in this part, and REM sleep here, and wakefulness. That's a cycle which is more or less about 90 minutes. So you can see here, with the same scale, in both senses, the electrical activity of the brain during this cycle. And you can see that it changes from a very low voltage, fast activity to more slow activity, slower activity, slower activity. The hertz are here at in the low part of the slide, and you can see here that it goes slower than theta, about 4 cycles per second, sleep spindles, and delta waves, which are about 1 and 4 hertz or cycles per second. And then during REM sleep, which we will see a little later, it becomes again very low voltage and very fast activity. That's a sleep cycle. In an adult, it's about 90 minutes. So in one night, it is repeated several times. You can see it in the side screens. You can see that's one cycle, another. And so you got as many cycles as hours of sleep. So it changes all the time. No? I'm going to talk about synchronization before present you our results. So synchronization of brain oscillations, that means synchronization all over the brain, is very important for brain functions. I will refer to synchronization as simultaneous brain oscillations or temporal coupling, and it provides time windows for communication among neurons. So that's why it is very important. It is implicated then in information processing, memory, consciousness, and of course, sleep. So why is important for brain functions? Because information flow in the brain, I mean sensory information flow, it follows a hierarchical organization. Then it follows highly specialized pathways. It's not mixed. Every sensory modality goes through very specialized pathways that are depicted more or less here. So you can see each color represents a different modality, and also the...
Apparently you can use your pointer this side.
Oh, thank you. Well, that's a little better. Thank you very much. Then you can see here, no, that are pathways from the brainstem to the cortex, and you can see here the different colors are from different pathways, and they don't mix. So the consequence is that the representation of every sensory phenomena and cognition is represented in a very way, far away from each other in the brain. So it is increasingly distributed. You can see here a brain, and you can see here visual information arrives here, auditory information arrives here, sensory information arrives here. Those are associative cortex, and motor information flows through here. So they are very far away, and we need to put that together. Well, the brain needs to put that together to understand anything. That's because why it is very important. Synchronization, this coming together of information can have several and has several mechanisms. One is the pathways. Ay, Dios mío, sorry for that. Ay, ya me fui. ¿Qué hice? Sí, me voy atrás. It can follow the pathways that are all over the cortex. No? Those are axons from one place to the other. But that's not enough. We would need so many axons that we will have a head like that. No? That's not convenient. So there are other options. And the other option is synchronization among neuronal activity and populations of neuronal activity. And that means that the firing of a neuron depends on the membrane polarization. Membrane polarization depends on excitatory and inhibitory inputs in each neuron. The excitatory and inhibitory inputs opens or close specific ion channels on the membrane. And these ion channels has specific, each type has specific time windows. So the opening or closing of these ion channels is crucial, because if they are not open or closed simultaneously or in a range of time adequate, then the neurons cannot communicate. Here is a figure of freeze. 3 neurons, those are the oscillatory membrane potential of this neuron. And then you can see that in the up states, this neuron can fire and can be excited by another input. Whereas in the lower part here, in this part, it is so she cannot receive, well, it cannot receive any information nor send any information. The neurons, the red one and the blue one, has to communicate some information. Then both of them has to be in the up state or excitatory state. Whereas the black one, which is in another timing, it's hyperpolarized when the blue one or green one wants to communicate, but it is hyperpolarized. It happens, no dialogue can be between the two of the neurons. So synchronization is very, very important. All kind of phenomena, cognition, consciousness, etc., because it provides time windows, adequate time windows for communication. Thus, simultaneous activation of neuronal assemblies, not only just a neuron, but a population of neurons, is necessary for communication. Thus, temporal coupling or synchronization, or you can name it with several names, is important for cognitive processes, and it culminates in a coordinated action in the brain. Ahora no camina. See? Okay, we will, there are several mechanisms of this communication or synchronization between neurons. One is a direct communication between neuron A and B through axons. and reciprocal communication. But there is another way to modulate these cycles of excitability and inhibitory state. And this is the one that we are going to talk about. There is also the possibility that another system or structure or region in the brain has simultaneous action upon both populations. So then both populations of neurons or single neurons will be receiving a common influence. This common influence comes from modulatory influences from global activating systems in the brain, and they change the critical time windows, acting over specific ion channels and specific open and closing time windows, as I said. No, each family of channels has a specific time. Thus, changing oscillatory activity, if you change these channels and these time windows, the global oscillation of populations will change, and that's what happens during sleep. This is just to show you that during sleep, during waking or REM and non-REM sleep, the brain goes from different, this is waking, from this kind of oscillatory pattern to non-REM sleep, which has this oscillatory pattern I show you in the first slide, and to REM sleep, which is again fast and low voltage. And there are many changes in the brain. We have no time to see all of them, but I want to show you here that these global influences that I was speaking come from the brainstem. In the brainstem, there are groups of cells that go all over the brain. Communicates all over the brain, and then they can change the state of the neurons. This is waking. In blue, there are pathways that are excitatory, and they carry sensory information and activates neurons. Then you have cholinergic pathways in red, and they are all, they can be both, or excitatory or inhibitory. Then you got norepinephrine pathways in the yellow, and serotoninergic pathways in green. And then you have some other groups of neurons here that act upon these groups of neurons in the brainstem, and they can change the entire brain because they are connections, widespread, diffuse connections all over. So they can act at the same time in different neurons of the brain, not just the information coming from the sensory pathways, but they change the state of all the neurons. So this is, during sleep, the brain has different neurochemical cocktails. No? Here, during waking, you have activated all these pathways that I mentioned. If you go to non-REM sleep, here in this part, you see that all the lines are broken because all of these systems go down. So the cortex remains, without this too much to say, but with lower modulation of all these modulators. And during REM sleep, there is a different brain because you can see that the cholinergic pathway remains activated during this state of sleep, whereas norepinergic, serotoninergic, glutamatergic are lower. Yes? Okay, sorry, I didn't say. These kind of oscillations in black are recorded over the scalp with electrodes located over the scalp, but the same happens if you implant electrodes inside the brain of animals. Thank you. I forgot to tell that.
But maybe there's many signals, so which are you showing here?
Okay.
You have 60
That's a very important question. I will try to stay fast, quick, because of time. If you put electrodes all over the cortex in a human being, you can put 12, 15, 52, 164, no, all over. There is a very important thing. You record this kind of pattern that I showed you in the first slide, and if you make a quantitative fine analysis, you will see differences. I will show later. But if you just see at the recording, then you will see that they are very, very similar. It has many reasons to be that way. We will see that during sleep it becomes synchronized. But it's also because the cortex is a very repetitive, how can I say, I don't have the word, a redundant network. So the changes that you observe in one part of the brain, this kind of changes, you observe it all over the cortex, yes? So you have to use quantitative analysis to extract some differences. At the visual inspection, it looks very likely. When you do quantitative analysis, then it becomes apparent that it depends on the state of the brain. They will be more or less synchronized. Thank you for the question, because I just pensé que era obvia, ¿no? Okay, then we ask, we have been doing that for many years, the laboratory. We ask, given that synchronization of brain oscillations is important for neural communication, then does synchronization all over the cortex degrades along a regular waking hours, I mean a regular day of about 16 hours of wakefulness? Does sleep, if you sleep, then is synchronization restored to the baseline values? And does prolonged sleep deprivation alters this synchronization more than a regular waking day? I will show results from some experiments that we did. I will show just the generalities, because there are many studies there. Here you have, for this, to assess this synchronization, we used cross-correlation analysis between the different electrodes, the voltage values of different electrodes. So results that I am going to show depends on the methodology used. We cannot know the absolute values, but we can know what happens between two conditions or among several conditions. So we used cross-correlation analysis between the different electrodes. We recorded over the scalp in humans. This is during waking. And here are the values in Fisher zeta scores, and at the bottom you can see all over there different broad bands: delta, which is the lowest, then theta, alpha, and beta bands. And in blue we have the values of cross-correlation between homologous sides of both hemispheres in the morning after having slept. In red, we have the same values, but after 40 hours of waking, see? After total sleep deprivation. And as you can see, the asterisks show a significant difference between after having slept and in the morning, but after sleep deprivation.
Pair correlations.
Pair correlation, yes, homologous, between homologous sites, between both hemispheres. So you can see that for all bands, the cross-correlation between homologous sides of both hemispheres, of left and right hemisphere, that's the main effect. So it's the summary of frontal, central, occipital, temporal, parietal electrodes. you can see that it drops significantly. The green line shows we left then the subjects sleep and recover from sleep deprivation, measure at the same time of day, and you can see that the green line is almost the same as the blue line, as the baseline. So with recovery sleep, the synchronization between hemispheres recovers. Then, in this side, we have the correlation values, but within the same hemisphere, between frontal and occipital, frontal, temporal, frontal, that's within the same hemisphere, but it's the main effect, so it's the average of all the, yes. Well, and you can see that the pattern is completely different. The blue line is the same, baseline. The red line is after sleep deprivation. And you can see that instead of losing, it increases, which probably means that the functional difference between the different areas is lost. The brain goes like, within the same hemisphere, it goes like una mezcla, ¿no? Una melcocha, a mixture. See? The homologous sites do almost the same task. I mean, left occipital and right occipital, both of them are specialized in vision, whereas frontal and occipital are specialized on different tasks, very different tasks. So it's not this, that's why it is not the same. Here, they do the task in a different way, but the same task. Both occipitals, see, both primary temporals here, etc. But within the same hemisphere, the tasks are very different. Here are motor tasks, here visual tasks, here spatial cognition, etc. So they become more similar in all of the bands. We have observed this pattern in many different groups of subjects and many experiments, so just a summary. Then we ask, is it species dependent? Is it only in men? Or it is, we can observe the same pattern in a different species. It's important because the brains are different, they have evolution, as we have just heard, etc. So we recorded it in rats, recorded the electrical activity in rats with implanted electrodes, so there is no volume conduction, etc. And we observe the same. Again, in blue, that's just between parietals of the rat, left and right parietal of the rat. So we observe the same. In blue, there is the correlation between both parietals when they sleep well. They were recorded all the time, of course. Then in red, you can see again the decrease in interhemispheric correlation after 6 hours. You can see at the bottom, 6 hours. This is 6 hours of sleep deprivation. Those are minutes. So you can see that the decrease in interparietal correlation drops in a linear, almost a linear way. Ay, quiero señalar aquí, just like in a linear way, and the correlation between minutes of waking and interparietal correlation is 0.6. So that's a very strong correlation between the amount of correlation between both parietals and hours of sleep deprivation. And again, the green line is after 6 hours of recovery sleep in the rat. You can see here, the mean, the mean after recovery, then there is again no differences between baseline and recovery sleep. So you have to record all the time and observe the monitor with the signals, and each time that the rat had a slow wave, we move them, we wake them. No? After this time, we had to use gloves because they become very, very aggressive. We got some bites. Well, then, if this happens with synchronization during waking, depending on having or not having slept, then we ask what happens in the brain during sleep with synchronization. No? And then we did several experiments. That's also a summary. And you can see here four, perdón, que siempre le pico donde no debe de ser. Ahí, es que están muy cerquita. Then for 4 of non-REM sleep, and we have here for REM sleep. In green, we have again the cross-correlation in Fisher zeta scores, and here we did a narrow band analysis. That means for every hertz, no? From 1 to 50 hertz. So in green means that correlation is higher during stage 4, and in gray during wakefulness. And here, that's in REM sleep in pink, and wakefulness again in gray. So you can see that the correlation, the cross-correlation between hemispheres, homologous sites, here are depicted. That's a head from above, and so you can see between frontals, between centrals, temporals, parietals, and occipitals. This is the average because that we did an ANOVA analysis. ¿Cómo se dice en inglés? ANOVA. Well, an ANOVA. And the main effect was significant. There are also other results, but I'm showing the main effect, which means that between all these homologous sites, you observe this average. So you can see that with the hertz, the cross-correlation changes. And you can see also that during stage 4 of non-REM sleep, this stage with the lowest delta and high voltage waves, correlation is higher than during wakefulness in almost all. Here are at the bottom are the significance. Well, it's also with color, but at the bottom you can see the significance for each hertz. So you can see that it's almost in all hertz is higher during stage 4. Stage 2 is very, very similar during non-REM sleep. In REM sleep, it's a little different. You can see that it's higher in slow frequencies, delta and theta. It's higher during sigma frequencies, which are the sleep spindles, and then again in fast activity from 25 to 50 hertz. During wakefulness, it's higher in beta, slow beta. During REM sleep, there is no significant differences. So this is for during sleep. Here are some references for different groups. Most of these are our groups, but there are also different groups than us that have found almost the same pattern. Again, if we see intra-hemispheric correlation within the same hemisphere, then you see a different pattern, similar to what we saw with, during sleep deprivation, after sleep deprivation. Then this is also cross-correlation in Fisher zeta scores and hertz. And you can see that the difference, I mean, in slow waves and very fast activity, it decreases. It is higher during waking and decreases during stage 4, also in REM sleep. And in some frequencies, it is frequency dependent, and it has neurophysiological reasons, which cannot, now, no, we cannot enter into that now. There are some frequencies within slow beta and sleep spindle activity that is higher in stage 4. In REM sleep, just in this frequencies, which correspond more or less to sigma frequencies, to sleep spindle frequencies, although there are no spindles during REM. And in the rest of the frequencies, it is higher during waking. So during REM sleep, you are losing again the differentiation between, functional differentiation between different regions. And there are some frequencies where there is no change between waking and REM sleep. At the bottom, you can see, no? This is more or less depicted here for intra-hemispheric correlation between frontal, central, parietal, occipital, and temporal, all of the interactions. And it's broken here for these frequencies during REM sleep. We asked the same question and said, well, is it just in men? Is it because it's a scalp recording? And then we recorded it in rats with implanted electrodes again, no, over the parietal cortex. And we see here that for the different frequency bands, it's again lower during, that is interparietal, left and right parietal. It's again lower during waking, higher during slow wave sleep or non-REM sleep, and still higher, even higher during REM sleep. So it is not a species-dependent phenomenon. Well, then we ask what happens specifically during REM sleep, because REM sleep is important. Well, it's very interesting because you have an activated brain, almost as activated as during waking, but you are asleep. And threshold to awaken you, it's higher. So the system is closed. So in a way of speaking, because it's almost not responding to external cues, but it's very activated. No? So we ask what happens specifically during REM sleep. Then we did different experiments. Here you have the central cortex in a human being. You see the fast activity, low voltage fast activity, left and right central cortex. But REM sleep, so it is known by physiological experiments that the pontine brainstem is activating all of the brain during REM sleep. It is known by different experiments. So the pontine brainstem provides all of the brain with a constant activation. Right? But well, I will go back to the phasic events, because there are also phasic activations. But during tonic REM, when there is no phasic activations, that's most of the time into REM sleep, you see, we did the experiment and we look closer to what happens among different regions of the brain, and we found, we observed that that's the cross-correlation between these three electrodes. That's vision, auditory, spatial areas. And we observe that that's during wakefulness. I point gray, which is wakefulness, and pink for REM sleep. I'm not talking about the other results. But you can see that between parietal and temporal here, it's that's excuse me, that's for fast activity. That's for gamma activity. You can see the same level. There is no significant differences, either for parietal and occipital. You can see the same level of synchronization, and also between temporal and occipital. So temporal coupling among these sensory, these regions in the brain are specialized, are the receiving cortex of all sensory information. It is processed there. So this, it is preserved during REM sleep. It's almost the same as during wakefulness. There were no significant results. So the binding capacity or the communication capacity between these regions is preserved during REM sleep. Then we have models for dreaming, for example, because dreaming has many images, auditory, visual, somatosensory. This is preserved during REM sleep. So the cross correlation or the synchronization between these areas is preserved. Then we observe also in the analysis, those are postdoc ANOVA, that frontal versus sensory areas is completely different. It is broken. So you can see here again wakefulness against REM sleep, in all of the figures. So between the supervisory cortex, this part of the cortex is very important because, well, it has received the name of executive cortex because it controls functions that are relevant for any kind of operation in the brain, like attention, excitability, planning actions, verification of what you did, etc. So that's the executive part of the cortex. It's very important then the results because the synchronization between this region and sensory posterior regions, it's lower than during wakefulness, also in gamma frequencies, in fast activity. It's a different panorama or view or vision of what happens during REM sleep. And during dreaming, you have very neated, very clear images, visual, etc. What you don't have is a very logic argument. Or topic. You lose logic, you lose evaluation, you fly and you don't question if it is possible or not. So this part, which is always, ¿cómo se dice? Checking if this is right or not, etc., is disconnected from the other part, which is flying, so you don't care, it is possible to fly or any kind of topic during your dream. During REM sleep, there is another phenomenon, very important. Its name comes from ocular movements. During REM sleep, the eyes start to move very, very fast. So in this trace, you can see horizontal eye movements, and you can see every time that you see a mirror image, because the electrodes are connected in a particular way, that's an eye movement. So here are an eye movement, another, and this is not all the time. They are phasic or transient events. Yes, both eyes, yes. Yes.
The vibrations of the eye are synchronized too?
What do you mean by vibrations?
Well, the movements. Are they moving up and down?
Yes. Yeah. Those are not vibrations. Yes, of course. This is right eye, left eye. And this is vertical eye movements. So during REM sleep, you can see it in babies or pets. They move the eyes. You can see it through the párpados, the eyelids. You can see they are moving, and they move in all directions, not just horizontal or vertical, also diagonal, circular, all kind of movements. Yes, and it is known that they are time locked to activations also coming from pontine brainstem. This is very well known in cats and rats, and they are time locked. So there is a phasic activation above the tonic activation that makes a lot of things. In this sense, they make the movements to the eyes to move. So you can see here they are ballistic and they are very fast. Some people say things or have proposed that you are looking at the imageries of the dream, but they are too fast for that. You can see it, no, in pets and babies. They are too fast. They are just like that. They are activations coming from the pontine brainstem. This is in cats. This is men. This is cats. And I just want to show you something that's during REM sleep, and this is unitary activity in the relay nucleus of the thalamus. And there are time-locked to eye movements, these discharges of neurons in this part, and they are time-locked, also you cannot see here, but they are time-locked to what happens in the cortex. That's the cortex, and this is lateral geniculate nucleus. They are called PGO waves, ponto geniculate occipital waves. Pardon. And the unitary activity, you can see time locked to these PGOs. There is always an increase pardon, in unitary activity. So we ask what happens in men with these phasic or transient activations during sleep. So we did an experiment with, perdón, voy a tomar un trago de agua. With magnetoencephalography, sorry, with 150 hours. Here you see the subjects sleeping inside the magnetometer. I'm finishing, thank you very much. I'm just finishing. And then here are the horizontal eye movements and vertical eye movements. So we choose during REM sleep, here in this part, all the eye movements that were vertical or horizontal. And we analyze what happens just before, so you don't got any artifact. And we found, tengo 5 minutes, a ver, déjenme pensar. Well, we found, we found activations with tomography, brain tomography, activations just before the eye movements in the amygdala, that's a subcortical structure, and in hippocampus. Then we try to see if, because that's a reverse solution, then we try to see if it's real. And then we recorded 4 patients, epileptic patients, that were evaluated for surgery. And they had electrodes implanted in the amygdala for this purpose. We just recorded sleep. So here is the eye movement. Here are frequencies. This is gamma frequencies, and you can see that gamma activity increases just before and after the eye movement. So what we saw with tomography happens also if you record it directly into the amygdala. In waking, eye movements during waking, we analyzed the same time just before the eye movement. During waking, there's no change. It is just during REM sleep. See? And we did also a spatial principal component analysis of this period of all of the sensors of the MEG results. And we saw that during tonic REM sleep, when there is no eye movements, the segments when there is no eye movements, just a few sensors were grouped in the first component analysis, which explained 40% of the variance. But just before the eye movement, almost all the sensors becomes together in the first component. You can see here, no? And it explains 70% or almost 70% of the variance for leftward or rightward eye movements, which is different during waking because they were also recorded during waking and analyzed. And you can see here that during wakefulness, before the eye movement is just the frontal eye fields, the contralateral frontal eye fields, which controls the eye movement. But during REM sleep, almost all the sensors becomes related. So all the cortex gets together. No? No, I think I'm going to skip this because of the time, no? Because we ask also what happens if you deprive selectively from REM sleep. So if you want, I show you later. This is in rats. This is in humans. So that's the summary. Siempre me pasa, yo no entiendo por qué. Ok, es que está tan cerquita, tengo que estar viendo. Sleep deprivation decreases functional connectivity between the two hemispheres, from functional connectivity or synchronization or temporal coupling or whatever you want to call it. Decreases functional specialization within the same hemisphere, in a general way of speaking, during sleep in general. It is not species dependent, nor scalp recording dependent. During the sleeping brain, the brain functional organization is modified, is completely changed. See? There is no time to see other things, but it's modified. The increased synchronization and functional connectivity between hemispheres and posterior associative areas facilitates redistribution of information because of those time windows are at the opening and closing at the same time. So information can flow very easily from one place to another. The decreased functional connectivity between frontoposterior associative regions, areas during REM sleep, facilitates novel creative associations because there is no restriction coming from the frontal part. Limbic activation during REM sleep facilitates emotional depotentiation, but this is for another talk because it's too long to tell it. And thank you very much for hearing, and thank you very much to all the collaborators. Those are students, ex-students, now they are researchers, independent researchers. For example, here is Sadie, here in the second line. And all of them have collaborated in the different experiments. So thank you very much. Pues a ver, alguien que...
This being a complexity science meeting, I was wondering whether there are elements of complex systems theory that you have found helpful to understand your research. So coupled oscillators, nonlinear dynamics, emergent properties, chaotic dynamics, and so on. Have you ever tried to use them to interpret your results?
I would love to do that, but I can't. I mean, I have a lot of limitations. I'm not a mathematician, but of course, there are several evidence that is a complex system, and all of that, what you said, and Dr. Markus Müller could perhaps in another talk tell you about it. I'm not qualified. So I am sorry, but I am sure it is, no? There are evidences, but I cannot explain them. I am not qualified. Thank you.
Thank you.
In the graph that you show on the effect of the sleep deprivation, you found this, basically the same pattern in humans and rats. However, the effect seems smaller in rats than in humans.
The effect?
Seems smaller in rats.
Yes.
The effect of the sleep deprivation.
The size of the effect.
Yes.
Yes, but this kind of, I think this is, I cannot tell that because this is dependent upon the methodology. And within the methodology, it includes how many times did you record it, which areas of the brain you recorded. So this difference can be real, or it can be a result of the methodology, and an experiment would be needed, no, to fix all the parameters. Those are different experiments in a different moment, and it's not the same. For example, the sleep cycle in the rat is about 10 minutes. So the amount of REM sleep, the duration of REM sleep in humans, it's about, let's say, an average 15 minutes, 20 minutes. In the rat, it's about 3 minutes. So it's very difficult to compare. No?
Excuse me. I have a general question. I mean, dreams have been, a big question for many, many years, from Freud and his interpretations, and people that say that we're cleaning information and so on. What is your current idea of mindfulness or the nature of dreaming?
Oh, thank you very much for your question. I still have this. Thank you very much for your question. I find it wonderful. There has been a lot of theories about what happens during dreaming and what happens having been dreamed something. Or, for example, there are some experiments that indicate that during dreaming, memory can be improved. However, I show you that almost all you have about maybe 15,000 eye movements during a night. So 15,000 times, the cortex becomes all together during the eye movements. And the rest of the time, well, you saw the results. So I think it's more complex than just memory. That's why I finished saying that during REM sleep, the brain, it's open to a lot of solutions. So it's very important for creativity. In that way, I think that during during non-REM also, but more than during REM sleep, because it's free from this constraint, no? So it can explore many options. And it does. I think it does. I think the most important part for cognition during waking is what happens during REM sleep, not the cinematographic result. That's just, from my point of view, it's just a side effect, a collateral. No, the important thing is what's happening with all this synchronization in the opportunity to the information to flow from one part to the other. So we have also evidence, but I don't have time. But during REM sleep, if you deprive selectively REM sleep, human beings selectively, just REM sleep, then when you do a task for the second time, you do the task before, then after REM sleep, the same task, the second time. And we have proven that inside the scanner. And the activation in the brain is as the first time. So as if the subject didn't know the task. The control group, which was awakened from other non-REM moments, of course, the activation changes, and lower mistakes and higher, faster reaction time. But deprived from REM sleep, the brain responds in the same way as the first time. So I think during REM sleep, information is integrated. And then you have the opportunity to mix old information with new information. Thank you.
More questions?
I say it.
After all, questions still emerge. So I was thinking, there are several mechanisms behind this synchrony, right? And at the beginning, you told us about this synchrony can be between two neuronal populations, or a third one that is synchronizing these two populations, for example. But I have seen that the main results are in the gamma man, in fast activity. Do you think that electrical synapses through gap junctions can play a role in this synchronization?
Well, yes, Garcia Ril has a lot of results about it in rats, and he has shown precisely that there are electrical synapses in the brainstem where REM sleep is controlled, generated, and also in gamma in the cerebral cortex. See, it can be also that. I mean, the mechanisms are not very well known yet. There are people who are working on that, but there are many possibilities. One is that they are receiving the same impulse, which has been shown in cats by Steriad. It can be that they have gap junctions. The reticular nucleus in the thalamus has gap junctions, so the synchronization is very fast among all the neurons. And in gamma, in the pontine, in the pontine structures, there are also gap junctions, which influence precisely gamma. Está en el de special issue, the experimental brain research.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, well, now if you have more questions, maybe you want to ask her in the coffee break. We have a coffee break now, so please use the opportunity to do that. And let's thank the speaker again. I just want to mention something that I didn't say before. During the event, we have an art exhibit, which is already all around the building.